your humanitarian broadcaster.
Welcome back. You're tuned into Inspired Afternoons with me, your host Miriam Mia, and now it's time for my baby. That's where my career in broadcasting commences, of educational insights and my passion for education. And I've always maintained in my mantra regarding education is leading a child towards responsible adulthood. And now I'm going to be speaking to the chairperson of the South African Democratic Teachers Union, and that's Mr. Mugwena Maluleka. And we're going to be discussing the challenges faced by educators and learners in 2020 as a result of the COVID pandemic, as well as how educators are going to assist, especially the grade 11s and Matrics of 2021, in starting to prepare early for the upcoming year. So what is planned on SADTU side in terms of the support they're going to provide the learners, as well as we're going to be asking in terms of are the educators in from SADTU side, is everybody prepared for the academic year 2020? So let me just check with Shazia if we have Mr. Mugwena Maluleka online. Good afternoon, Mr. Mugwena Maluleka.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having us, and good afternoon to your listeners.
And welcome to Salam Media. So tell me, from SADTU's perspective, are all our educators and our teachers ready for the academic year 2021?
Well, it's a very difficult question, I must say. The teachers, having joined this particular profession because they care about their children and they care about their people and their country, are always ready to do anything to help the learners. However, we are facing a new wave, which is a second wave, and therefore there are a number of things that needs to be attended to in order to support the teachers to be able to do their work, which is to building the nation and giving our children hope, and building the skills that our economies in the world will really need in order to vitalize them, and so forth. So yes, we have a crisis. However, the educators are always there to devise means and improvise where it's possible. However, they cannot do that alone. And that's the answer to my question. It can be that they're ready mentally, but it is, we have got to do certain things to ensure that as they come back, they are able to do their work. If we cannot do those particular things, we cannot risk the safety and the health of the teachers and the learners.
Absolutely, and that's why we've been trying to. In fact, before this interview, I was meant to speak to Mr. Elijah Mashlanga from the spokesperson from the Department of Education. However, we seem we're having difficulty raising him because in one of the articles, I think it was the Daily Maverick, he's quoted as saying that there was no requests from any unions or governing body or any of the other stakeholders with regard to delaying the academic year. So the academic year for educators will go ahead as planned on the 21st of January, and for learners 27th of January. From SADTU side, are you in talks or have you engaged with the Department of Education in terms of any concerns, and is SADTU ready for the academic year to commence on 25th January 2021?
Yeah, we have not made any demands to that effect on whether the schools should delay in terms of the reopening based on the following things. That one, we haven't engaged the Department of Education in terms of the new year. The only time we engaged with the department was last year in terms of what we can call recovery plan. And in that particular recovery plan, it was to look at how We empower the schools on their own to use their own professional judgment, given their professional autonomy to be able to say, what are the building blocks that a learner needs to be able to proceed to the next grade? And therefore, how do we then make sure that the next teacher is able to know from the other teacher what are the areas that needs to be emphasized in order to ensure that there is no deficit in the life of this particular learner during the 12 years or 5 years and so forth of the schooling of this particular learner. That's one. So we're hoping that the Department of Education this week will meet with the unions and assess the situation, because we must not, on the basis of the date of the 25th and the 27th, be mechanical, because education is not mechanical. You're not dealing with computers. You're dealing with fears of both the learners, teachers, as well as those who are working in education. They have their own fears. And therefore, we need to be able to address those particular fears, understand what those fears are, and then be able to deal with them, because whatever we need as a country and as a nation is to always overcome our fears so that we are then able to defeat this particular invisible enemy that is attacking our people. So with the rising numbers, we've got to understand and have a pillar in engagement with the department to then say any other country that reopens the schools has to do that looking at whether the numbers are going down. In other words, are they declining or are they rising? So the WHO's principles and strategies is always based on, you've got to look at the 14 days of the numbers conservatively reducing so that you then are able to open schools safely. So therefore, this week, got to engage, but also we start have to observe up until the date of the 25th, whether we are going to see the numbers declining. And as they decline, therefore, it forms the basis of reopening the schools on a safe way. That's the first thing. The second thing, in order because we have not made any demand whatsoever, it's precisely because we understand the importance of education, that first and foremost, the health and safety of the teachers and the learners must reign supreme on any other decision that has got to be made. So therefore, the second very important thing is that don't base a decision of reopening of the school or not reopening the school on the politics or on wishful thinking. You've got to base that on the science and facts that are there. You've got to base that on what the teachers tell you and what the healthcare workers are telling you. So you integrate both education and health strategies to be able to deal with any possible cases that might be detected at the level of the school, with the intention of eradicating the spread of this particular virus, but also not increase the new cases, but isolate them, be able to deal with them in a better way. So you need strategies that are both health-wise as well as education and integrate those particular things. So that will then give you an assurance on whether you are going to reopen the school for all the learners or you're going to reopen the school for a particular grade, given the level 3 that determines the number of people that have got to be in a particular workplace at a particular point in time. So these are the things that need to be looked at. The third one is that there must be a publication of a protocol or regulation that responds to the second wave in terms of level 3. Last year's level 3 and this year's level 3 are not the same in terms of transmissibility of this particular virus. It is more transmitted, and therefore it needs more regulation and protocol that needs to be followed in the schools and so forth. So yes, we have not made a demand on whether schools must not open and so forth. We understand the importance of education, but we understand the importance of health, that it must reign supreme at all material times.
I've just got a message from Afzal Noor Muhammad here, Ms. Maluleka, and he says in pre-COVID, the ANC government messing up education. They're simply useless when it comes to managing education under COVID conditions. Thank God for committed and dedicated teachers who fill the void left by the Department of Education. So they are saluting the educators there who this person feels that even pre-COVID, Department of Education were really not there in terms of providing resources and the necessary quality of education. Mr. Maluleka, what I need to ask you, and I think the other important consideration is, while during the first wave, the virus seemed to have attacked the more vulnerable population group were the senior citizens, your 60 plus was the vulnerable. But this time around, we're seeing it's actually your 16 to your 21-year-olds that the virus seems to be targeting younger people. Previously, the younger school-going learners were sort of not the target for the virus, but this time it's not the case. So that, I'm sure, is another consideration that SADTU must be also playing in mind, especially in terms of the target being the grade 11 in Matric pupils. In terms of this time here, the strain is a little different in terms of who the vulnerable group is.
I agree with you. That's what I have said now. That's to say, you're not going to approach the reopening of the schools mechanically, given the fact that 2021, the transmissibility was not the same as this one, because you had a situation where young people were not really being affected severely by this. But now we're having the second wave, or what they call a new variant, that which is affecting everybody. That's why I was saying you need to approach this flexibly by looking at the numbers and by being informed by the science, and therefore say, what is it that we put in place in the form of PPEs? What do we put in place in the form of additional personnel to ensure that the areas are always cleaned, they are always sanitized, they are always disinfected, so that the schools do not create new cases and so forth. We have seen that when these things are followed, when protocols are followed to the latter, we have always seen that we can be able to reduce the number. So the mobility itself, it's going to tell us that with the numbers that will then be declining for the next 14 days, if they decline, it will then say to us, yeah, what are the things that the government is supposed to do, and what are we supposed to do as parents and as teachers to ensure the safety of both the learners and the teachers? Because at the end of the day, it's the community that needs to be saved. And it's us who must make sure that we don't contribute to the spread. Now, the issue that Mohammed has raised is very correct. It is that this particular pandemic has exacerbated the inequalities that are there. Hence, you saw that in 2020, there were schools that did not have sanitation, that the schools did not have water. Those are the things we are not supposed to be arguing this time around, because we think that we have built experience, that we have learned our lessons, that the government should have those particular things in place. The issues of the quality of the PPEs is not something that we should be fighting about now. It's something that the government has learned, that stealing the money from the poor and then giving them low quality masks has not worked. In actual fact, has exacerbated these particular virus. And therefore, it is important that as the community, as the people of our country, we hold everybody accountable for what we do in educating our children, and but also in how we take care of the resources of this particular country. So I fully agree with him that the teachers themselves were there to be innovative. They were there, they were creative. We have learned a lot of lessons from the management of the schools in terms of how they're dealing with the rotation of the learners and how they are going to address those particular areas they have been able to deal with it. In particular, the grade 11 and the grade 12, they are now elderly learners, and therefore they might be susceptible to the infection. And therefore, what is it that we put in place? And hence I said, it's science that must tell us, how do we address these elderly learners who are in our schools, who are 18 years, 19 years old, and how do we make sure that they don't get to be compromised? And we look at the numbers in the classroom, reduce the numbers, increase the number of workers that must be able to clear these particular areas, and change our mindset all the time. I will never finish any discussion with anyone and yourself where I don't say, you can build any system, you can build protocol, you can have regulation, you can have laws, but if the people don't change their mind and take responsibility of their own life and the lives of the person next to you, and then think that life is more precious to any other person, and then you then practice your hand hygiene, health living, and health, your style must change in terms of how you perceive this particular thing. We can have good policies, but those policies cannot help us. We can have very good schools, but if we are not going to follow the protocols to the latter, we are not going to be able to deal with the situation. So fully is that, yes, that has got to be taken into consideration. Hence I said, it can't be mechanical. We can't just say we put the date and therefore the date is fine. Nobody has given us any request that we must not do that. No, science is going to tell us that we cannot put more grades there because we might be risking the learners because this particular variant is more vicious than the first one.
Yes, we see. But I think on a positive note, educators have done a sterling job and needs to be, all of them need to be commended in terms of the ability in which they have adapted and pivoted to different type of learning platforms. I mean, each educator looked at their classroom or the pupil situation and challenges and then used a platform, or whether it was a WhatsApp group, whether it was Zoom lessons, Google Teams, depending on resource available. But teachers went beyond the call of duty to ensure that they maximize teaching and learning time, and they will be able to interact with their learners, with the parent community as well, to ensure lessons went out there. So I think that's a great positive, that if schools maybe are open staggered, or it's alternate days depending on class sizes, and that at least teaching and learning time won't be lost, especially for the grade 11 in Matric pupils, because educators are already now trained and have a better idea that if we have to work online or we have to learn distant learning, they have a better idea in terms of how to send lessons, lesson plans, and how to communicate with the learners, so that time for learning, teaching and learning, there's no losses in terms of that. How do you feel regarding that? Do you think our educators are better placed to work if they have to learn distant education?
Let me thank you for that question, because as I was responding, I have said one, we have learned a lot from the teachers and their management in terms of innovation, in terms of how they had to make sure that the learners are rotating in terms of coming to school. They've done a fantastic job around that. They built resilience in our learners and also into our communities. They contributed to the lessening of the spread of the virus when we were still in schools. Because the numbers that are rising now are rising because it's the festive season and not as a result of the school, because the schools have played their important role of educating everyone. And we build strong ambassadors in our children who in grade 1 or grade R, they will tell you, Mommy, Daddy, you've got to wash your hands, you've got to sanitize, you've got to put up your mask. And that is the role of education. And we need to commend the teachers because they are always there to ensure that we are able to change behaviors, build strong characters in our children, in our communities, and we need to thank them and commend them for the work that they have done. And that's why I was agreeing with Mahunat when he says that the teachers were there when the government was there, or not when the politicians were not there. Politicians pronounce, but it is the teachers who face the learner who has gotten not eaten, the learner who comes to school without a mask, and therefore they need to improvise. They need to support that particular learner. So we need indeed to support the teachers. And one way of supporting the teachers is to provide them with psychosocial services, as they will be dealing with the losses of their colleagues who passed on during this particular festive season. The learner might be expecting to see a teacher who they're used to, and then they will be told the teacher is no more, or the teacher is in hospital, or the teacher is home. And clearly it is that we need more psychosocial support for the learners when they come back to school, and the teachers and so forth. So we continue to be building resilience, to be, helping the teachers and the learners to be able to ensure that they are able to learn. In terms of blended learning, there's no way you can avoid it, because if in a hotspot area, there's going to be a declaration by the director or the head of department to say, we close that particular area, it's locked down, there's not going to be schooling in that particular area, it is that will not stop. Because then the teachers must be equipped with the tools of trade, and the learners must be equipped with learning materials in the form of whatever is WhatsApp and so forth, so that they are then able to continue to be doing. If it means we've got to go to the nearest shopping mall to collect homework as a parent for your child that is being dropped there by the teachers or the principal, we need to do that. So the innovations that we saw brought by the teachers are commendable, and that's why they were there. And when we were calling for safety, and said, please prioritize safety. Make sure that you prioritize radio lessons, prioritize TV lessons. These lessons must be taught by the qualified teachers, prioritize online and so forth. Make sure that the have-nots are not going to be left behind because they don't have data. It is time that indeed we must unite and they say data must fall, because if it doesn't fall, we can have a situation where those particular rural areas and township are not going to have education when we are locked down, when the schools are closed. Learning must not stop because face-to-face is not taking place. The teachers have shown us they've done it, but we need to give the teachers more support now, because they were improvising. They were using their money to make sure that the learners have got data. They were using their own data and so forth. It is now the responsibility of all of us to say to the government, to say to the telecommunication companies, you cannot go on as telecommunication companies to rake in profit when we are supposed to be protecting life and making sure that we give our learners the skills and the knowledge and the attitude to be able to help us to build even a stronger economy, which they will also be able to benefit.
Absolutely. And in terms of preparations for our Matrix 2021, because 2020 was a difficult year for the Matrix who wrote at that time there. Tell me, from SADTU's end, is there a special plan to assist the Matrix of 2021 in terms of their academic year getting off to a positive start, irrespective of how the pandemic moves in 2021?
Yeah, that is a very important question, because we have seen and we have had a number of high schools that are saying they are not going to wait until the 25th. They are going to start next week on the 18th. And then we would want to say that they must make sure that as they start on the 18th and as part of preparing the grade 12, they need to take into account the fact that the teachers of grade 12 had a burnout last year, and therefore they need to do it with the consideration and with all the precautions that are necessary. So it shows you that the school management and the teachers and the communities, if they work together, they will not wait for the government to tell them what to do. They know what to do. Hence, most of the high schools are already calling for the grade 12 to start on the 18th, even before other grades are coming, so that they orientate them and they start with the work. We have always have teachers who have been improvising. They were working in the evening. They were working on weekends. Those things we expect to happen again. Despite the fact that the government has not given them the salary increase last year, we have seen teachers sleeping in schools and helping the learners. So these are our teachers and these are our members, and we will be supporting them. And we'll be having a lot of workshops this year in terms of timetabling, in terms of mental health, because they need our support. And as SADTU, we've also provided free service for issues of counseling and on any matter, whether it's COVID related or it's anything that needs to be there. So we have got that particular service that we offer to all the teachers, and not only teachers of SADTU, to all the teachers in the country. We're working with service providers. We have got a call center where we are going to say the teachers may call and be advised in terms of how they deal with emotional issues, mental stress, and all those particular things that normally would attack the teachers and then cause burnout and fatigue in the teachers. So we preparing ourselves, but as I'm saying, we shouldn't not take into account the fact that we can plan for the 18th, we can plan for the 25th, but we must always be aware that the science must always inform us in terms of whether they are real, the tools are in place, the precautions and all the safety measures are in place to ensure that we proceed with any other extra work that the teachers normally would do. We always say it should not be something that is imposed on the teachers. The teachers themselves are always there to make sure that they do the extra classes. But once the department wants to impose that and increase the hours of work without taking into account that they will then be creating a lot of harm in terms of the mental stability of the teachers by pushing them to extra hours, allow the teachers and their principals to agree with the students and the parents and design a model that will work for them. So don't impose extra classes or what. Allow the schools themselves to do that. And they have always been doing that very well. We have a program in some of these particular provinces of training the matric teachers in terms of the gateway subject. We will continue to do that. We have a program for the principal. We will continue to do that. But we always are very careful not to impose any other thing as an organization. We've got to hear from the principals. We've got to hear from the school management team. We've got to hear from the teachers to say what is it that we can help them on and so forth. So yes, the teachers will always be there to help them, but let's help them. And I'll continue to emphasize this. The nation must prioritize education. And in prioritizing education, you've got to prioritize that particular teacher in terms of the safety and protection to ensure that we continue to be building a very strong quality education for a strong quality economy that is inclusive, so that we are then able to deal with poverty, unemployment, and inequality.
Yes, and that is one of the comments that my caller, I got a Facebook comment regarding the fact that educators have not received an increase. So they wanted to know, educators not get salary increases, and this will impact on teacher morale 2021. What is SADTU's view on this?
Yeah, we are busy with the drafting of the papers to take the matter to the Constitutional Court, because the Labour Appeal Court has found that the government cannot enforce the collective agreement that would have ensured that they get their salary increase last year with effect from the 1st of April. Of course, Labour lost the case in the Labour Appeal Court, and therefore we are appealing this judgment at the Constitutional Court as the highest court of the land, to emphasize to the court to then say, yes, the teachers are in the forefront, the nurses are always in the forefront, and if they are in the frontline workers, you've got to make sure that you motivate them, make sure that their families are taken care of, and therefore these particular lack of increases has really demoralized them, has demotivated our teachers. But despite the fact that there have been no increases, we have seen the teachers working over weekends. We have seen them because they joined the teaching profession on the basis that they care and they love for their people, and therefore we must not take that for granted. We need to be able to come and be able to work with the teachers, work with everybody in education, work with everybody in health, and appreciate the police and appreciate the public servants for the work that they are doing, and make sure that we hope that the Constitutional Court can hear our plea that says that these public servants deserve to be given their increases, because already their children are not being paid for by the government, because most of our teachers, not all, actually all our teachers and all our nurses and many of our policemen and women, their children are not getting NAFSAs because they don't qualify. And all the public servants, because they work for government, they don't get RDP housing. And therefore, these are the things that needs to be taken in account by the Constitutional Court to then say, how on earth, when they don't have any support in terms of NAFSAs for the students in the higher education, and when they don't have the support in terms of housing, would they not be given that small increases that were going to be effected so that they can able to take their children to higher education institutions in order to build the country? So we are taking the judgment to court. So I can say it is not going to be an easy battle. It is going to be a very long and stretching battle, because Constitutional Court does not work like any other court where you can ask the court to say on an urgent basis, hear the matter. The Constitutional Court works on the basis of whether our case can be taken directly to the Constitutional Court or not, and we have got to cross that particular battle. And having crossed that, then we can go into the substantive legal and constitutional arguments at the level of the court to convince the court to say this particular judgment is very detrimental to our children, it's very detrimental to the people who are receiving public services, because if the nurses and the doctors and the cleaners in our hospitals are not getting the increases like the teachers and so forth, it impacts on their morale, and therefore the services become so poor for the people of our country.
Absolutely, and we support you on this, and from Salam Media's, and we wish you success in your Constitutional Court application. As you correctly said, these are public servants. They serve us, the doctors, the nurses, the educators, and we've seen how at the front line, doctors, nurses, and educators were there on the front line, at times putting their own health at risk to serve to serve the fellow citizens of the country. So we salute you in that regard as well with your application. And as you've highlighted, even though the morale is low, they still continuing to serve the learners. So we watch the space and we support you in this one. And I think what makes I think yourself as SADTU as a union angry as well as ordinary South African citizens is to find out how money squandered from the government's end, tenders that go wary, how money is lost in terms through corruption, as we've seen with the PPE scandal and many scandals, if we've seen the truth being revealed at the Zondo Commission. So if there's money for corruption, then there is money to pay our public servants a decent salary. Do you agree?
I fully agree. But corruption is stealing from those that do not have, but also it is stealing from the people who are at home, who cannot work, who need our services as nurses, as doctors, as teachers, as police, and any other public servant. So if you don't pay them, basically it is that you are already destroying the societal fabric that we're supposed to be building of care, kindness, and compassion with the people that do not have, and so forth. So we need to be able to open cases against those particular people that we have got evidence that these are the people who have inflated the prices of the PPEs. They must be dealt with by the law enforcement agencies, and therefore we must be united as a nation, as the people of this particular country, against corruption in whatever form. And then we need to build a very strong civil society in this country that can hold those who are in office, those who have elected to lead us, accountable for each and every little cent that we raise through taxes, because this is the taxpayers' money, and then stealing the taxpayers' money is stealing from the poor.
And I'd like to just touch upon the Matric marking for 2021. So for 2020, Matric marking has comments for the class of 2020. Feedback from your educators in terms of how the marking is going. I know there were concerns, the marking center, in terms of health and safety precautions and that, but from your members, have you received any feedback in terms of the marking that is currently underway for the class of 2020?
Yes. Thanks for the question. The report we received from our monitors has been that yes, the marking is progressing. Of course, there have been some small problems there and there. We regret that we have already lost one life in KZN, and therefore the union there has taken it upon itself to ensure that the department is able to test the people in the center and spread the testing like they did in the Eastern Cape to ensure that they protect those who are in the marking centers and so forth. So we also have learned in the other areas that those who started marking in December and so forth are beginning to experience problems of payment. We would then be intervening in making sure that those that have already finished marking are able to be paid according to what they've agreed with the employer at the time they were signing those particular papers and so forth. And then we are saying in all the centers that we have received reports, we have intervened with where the problems were. Now, at this particular stage, we want to send hope to our children. We want to send hope to our parents that at least marking is progressing. We're hoping that marking can be finished on time so that they receive their results. But it cannot be done at the expense of life. First and foremost is the safety and the health of those particular people who are marking there, and all those who are working there. They must first and foremost be safe for them to be able to give us quality outcome in terms of the marking. And so if there's going to be a delay of 2-3 days for finishing, I think I want to plead with the nation to say, please appreciate that it is because of the uncertainty that is brought by this particular pandemic, where a center may be closed because there are 2 cases or 3 cases. You have got to have people quarantining, and therefore you've got to disinfect and decontaminate the center in order to ensure that we have got a safe environment under which the people are going to be working. So we need to appreciate that we can set the dates, but those dates must serve as guidelines for us to work towards, but they cannot be at the expense of life and they cannot be above life.
Absolutely. So I, from SADTU side, just appealing to all the matriculants as well as I think anxious parents that please, if there may be a delay of couple of days, please have patience, bear with them. And I'm sure the education authorities will be in communication with universities, FET colleges, as well as other tertiary educational institutions, because they need to then relook at their first year intake with regard to the commencement of the academic year, because everybody is now waiting. I think there's a vacuum there that before you progress, you need your results. So I'm sure that higher learning institutions have been consulted in terms of when the academic year for the new intake will commence.
Yes, last year agreements have been reached between the basic education and the higher education to ensure that our education institution take that into account. Hence, you see that the higher education will be admitting until the end of March, and therefore they will also be taken into account. Any delay will also be accommodated by the higher education institution. So there's been talk between the two departments, and we are confident that the universities themselves will also be out there to assist the students.
Mr. Maluleka, I thank you so much for your time, for extending us the privilege of your time. I know the interview ran slightly longer, but you've given us lots of information, lots of insight into education, especially from educators' perspective, as well as the renewed commitment from teachers in spite of all the challenges, not to mention financial challenges with the increase being withheld for now. Educators still remain resolute and determined to serve the learners of our country, South Africa, and you're looking forward to the 2021 academic year. So on behalf of everybody here on Salam Media, we wish the educators and learners well and all the best for the commencement of 2021. As you've said, we take it by week. If there's anything we learn from this pandemic is to take things week by week. Let us see how it progresses and make decisions there. And if we need to pivot and adapt in terms of blended learning, so be it. But learning will commence. It's just a matter of how we're going to, whether it's going to be classroom or it's going to be a combination of blended learning and classroom.
Thank you so much for giving us this opportunity, and we want to thank your listeners and yourself for the time. And we wish you to be safe, and all of us must do it all to make sure that we cut the chain of the spread.
Thank you so much, and looking forward to chatting to you in the future as well. That is Mr. Mugwena Maluleka, and he's the chairperson of SADTU, and indeed he's given us a perspective on various angles and dimensions regarding education in general, as well as 2021 regarding challenges faced by educators as well. I'm so pleased he even gave us a report back in terms of how Matric 2020 marking is commencing. Yes, no doubt there are anxious parents and matriculants awaiting their results, awaiting so that they can plan for their future in terms of what vocation, what career they would like to pursue. So it's a time where they feel they are in a sort of a vacuum at the moment, not knowing anything. But you know what, for matric class of 2021, enjoy this break, and a well-deserved break. I think your mind and body needs it after last year's ordeal. And for the matrics of 2021, you know what, it starts now. You have many resources at your disposal in terms of learning platforms, online learning. So your educational year can start now. You've been trained to become independent learners. So now is the time that you're supposed to be engaged in your learning. And you know what, it's yours and your career and your future. So you need to make the time, and you need to commence your academic year irrespective of what is happening around us. You can safely begin at home in terms of preparation for Matric 2021. We're going to go for a short break, and when we come back, we're going to be rounding off.